At Mother's Day lunch, she raised her glass and said, "I'm proud of all my children, except the loser at the end of the table." So I gave her a gift she'll never forget. Under the vaulted ceiling of my mother's sunlit dining room, I watched her raise her champagne flute high, her voice gliding over the room like silk dipped in venom. "I'm proud of all my children," she said, pausing just long enough to sharpen the punchline, "except the loser sulking at the end of the table." The laughter hit instantly, hard and cruel, like they'd all been waiting for permission to laugh at me. My sister Trisha nearly choked on her mimosa. Her husband, Devin, slapped the table with exaggerated amusement, and my younger brother, Eli, leaned over and whispered, "Don't take it personal, man. It's just mom being mom." I stared at the lines around her mouth, the ones that always tightened when she was about to humiliate me. Her eyes met mine for a second, and in them, I saw no regret, just the same smug spark of control she always carried when she knew I wouldn't fight back. They never defended me. Not once. Not when I was 17 and missed prom to work extra shifts so Eli could get braces. Not when Trisha called me a walking wallet at Christmas 3 years ago. And certainly not now, in front of a dining table filled with family and friends who were only too happy to treat me like the designated family punchline. But today something cracked wide open inside me. I didn't shout or storm out because that would have only added fuel to their story of me being too sensitive, too dramatic. Instead, I reached under the table and quietly placed a small matte black box right in front of my mother's plate. "Happy Mother's Day," I said, voice steady, even gentle. She blinked, momentarily thrown off. "What's this?" she asked, suspicion already curling around her words. "You'll see," I said, stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked away without looking back. 10 minutes later, I was in her driveway, standing beside the black luxury SUV I had surprised her with on her 62nd birthday last summer. She had bragged about it to her book club, told her friends her favorite child had gifted it, but never once mentioned that the title was in my name. I slid the second key from my pocket, started the ignition, and backed out slowly, calmly, like I was running errands. Somewhere behind me, inside that perfectly staged house, my mother screamed. She had opened the box. I didn't need to hear her to picture it. Her perfectly manicured nails digging in a velvet lining, pulling out a faded photo of me at 10 years old, holding a homemade Mother's Day card and a crumpled bouquet I had bought with coins I saved from skipping lunch for a week. On the back, written in my adult handwriting, was a single sentence. "This was the last time I thought I mattered to you." For the next 2 weeks, the silence from my family was loud and deliberate. No calls, no texts, no cryptic Facebook quotes from Trisha pretending to be misunderstood. Then, one afternoon, Devin broke the stillness with a message that nearly made me laugh. "Hey man, that car thing really messed her up. Maybe just apologize and smooth it over." Apologize for what? For being publicly humiliated on a day meant to honor the bond between a mother and child? For reclaiming something I paid for in full, with no thanks, no respect, not even a thank you card? I didn't respond. I didn't block him either. I wanted to see how far they'd push this. The answer came 3 days later, in the form of a voicemail from my father, a man who never asked questions unless they came with expectations. "If you're done acting like an attention seeker," his gravelly voice said, "Eli could use some help with tuition." I laughed so hard I almost dropped my phone. Eli, the golden boy, the one who had been figuring things out for 6 years while I quietly covered his credit card bills and pretended he still had a future. I told myself I was done with all of them, and for a few weeks I believed it. But then came Grandma's birthday, her 83rd. The only one in the entire family who ever saw me as anything more than a convenient solution. I went for her, not them. Her tiny house sat just outside Charleston, with fresh-cut grass and air that always smelled like chamomile and old soap. She greeted me like always, with peppermint candy and a hug that didn't expect anything in return. I almost forgot what I'd walked into. Then I went into the kitchen to get ice and paused at the doorway. I wasn't trying to spy, but I heard my name, and that was enough to freeze me in place. Trisha's voice, too loud and smug as usual, cut through the clatter. "He's not really family," she said. He's just a wallet with feelings. The room erupted with laughter. Devin chuckled. Well, feelings don't pay rent. Then my mother sighed, that dramatic breath she took when she wanted sympathy without responsibility. I just wish he learned how to take a joke, she said. He always makes it about him. And then the dagger, my father's voice, flat and final. He only helped so he could feel important. Let him feel small for once. I stood there with the ice bucket in my hands, not moving, barely breathing, letting each word carve a little deeper than the last. They hadn't seen me yet. I could have walked away, saved face, left with whatever pride I had left. But I walked in instead. The room went dead silent. No one tried to cover it up. Not really. Trisha blinked like she didn't understand how sound carried through walls. My mother reached for my arm and said, "Don't twist it, sweetheart. We were just reminding each other how useful I used to be." I said, cutting her off. "Don't worry." Message received. I didn't leave. Not yet. Grandma still hadn't had her cake. But I watched them carefully the rest of the night. How no one looked me in the eye. How Eli handed me a paper plate like it was a peace offering. How Devin suddenly wanted to talk about interest rates in the stock market, as if a casual chat could reset the clock. They knew I was hurt. They also knew I wasn't going to yell, wasn't going to cry. And that terrified them more than anything. 3 days after Grandma's party, I got an email from my bank, an automated fraud alert about an attempted transfer from an old account I barely remembered. It was a joint account I'd opened with my father 5 years earlier when I helped him refinance the mortgage after a health scare he never acknowledged but quietly used as leverage. The account had been untouched for years, dormant, forgotten, by me at least. Not by them. The amount wasn't huge, a little over $4,000, but it was enough to send my pulse racing. I froze the account immediately, flagged the transaction, called the bank, and requested full statements. It didn't feel like an attack. Not yet. It felt like a test. One of those silent family manipulations dressed up as practicality. They must have thought I wouldn't notice, or worse, that I wouldn't care. I didn't call. I didn't scream. I didn't text a single one of them. Instead, I pulled an old binder from my closet, the one labeled tax stuff, but filled with more than W-2s and receipts. Over the next 4 evenings, I sat at my kitchen table and built a record, cold, clean, calculated. Every Venmo request, every late-night Zelle transfer, every excuse-laden message, Trisha's broken-down car that mysteriously stayed broken for 2 years, Eli's emergency tuition fund that never actually enrolled him in anything, my mother's temporary insurance gap that resulted in me covering 2 root canals and 1 surprise colonoscopy. I even found the florist receipt from the $300 birthday bouquet I sent when Trisha said she was too depressed to celebrate. I didn't do it out of obligation back then. I did it because I thought that was what family meant. That illusion had now been smashed to splinters. The total came out to $46,950.62. Not a symbolic number. Not an estimate. Exact. Verified. Time-stamped. I stared at it for a while, the way someone stares at the debris after a storm. Stunned, not by the destruction itself, but by the realization that had been building for years, right under their nose. I called Quinn, my old college friend who'd gone into law and now worked as an independent attorney. I'd once spotted him $600 for his bar prep course when he was broke and desperate. He never forgot that. When I told him what I had, he didn't hesitate. "We'll draft a demand letter," he said. Certified mail. No drama. Just truth. 7 days later, 3 identical white envelopes were signed for at 3 different addresses. My mother's condo, Trisha and Devin's townhouse, my father's place in the suburbs, where Eli still lived rent-free under the pretense of getting back on his feet. Each letter included a personalized breakdown, a summary sheet, and a payment deadline, 90 days. No interest, no penalties, just closure delivered with receipts. The fallout began with Trisha. First, a flurry of texts. "You're sick. You need help. I can't believe you'd stoop this low." Then came the gaslight crescendo. "Those were gifts. You offered. You never said it was a loan." She was right. I never said it. Because it shouldn't have had to be said. Families repay you in loyalty, in showing up, in defending you at the damn dinner table. not in silence followed by accusations. Her final message before I muted the thread was, "You're ruining this family." Next came my father. Not a call. A voicemail to Quinn, his voice low and bitter. "We're blood," he said. "You can't sue your own father. There are laws about this." He didn't like hearing that. Yes, in fact, you absolutely can, especially when the plaintiff has years of documentation, signed acknowledgments, and evidence of unauthorized financial activity. He threatened to countersue. Quinn sent him the full record with timestamps. He never responded again. My mother never called. She sent a handwritten letter in cursive, so tight it looked like it was stitched onto the paper. Ink smudged in places where she'd clearly wiped her eyes before it dried. "I gave you life," she wrote. "I held your hand when you were sick, prayed for you when you failed. And now you send lawyers?" There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just guilt, her favorite weapon. The same blade she'd used at every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering that ended with me cleaning up their mess and being told I was ungrateful for mentioning it. Day 21 arrived with a new shift. Trisha filed a counterclaim in small claims court, accusing me of emotional manipulation. She said I had coerced her into accepting financial help, created a psychological burden, and now she was experiencing mental distress. I sent Quinn the screenshots. "This'll get tossed in 10 minutes, he said. He was wrong. It took 12. The judge barely looked up while dismissing her suit, simply asking if she had any documentation of mental harm or coercion. She mumbled something about feeling targeted, then left the courtroom in tears. Week 5, my father still hadn't responded, so we filed for a judgment by default. Within 3 days, a lien was placed on one of his accounts, and 2 garnishment notices were issued. It hit faster than I thought. One of my old coworkers texted me and said Raymond had a full-blown meltdown at the local bank when he couldn't withdraw from his checking account. I smiled at the message but didn't reply. My mother was last. She ignored the suit entirely. No reply, no fighting, not even a call to Quinn. But when she went to fill a prescription 2 weeks later, her pharmacy declined the card she used. Her retirement benefits had already begun being docked a percentage. Word got back to me from a cousin who said she sold off her antique silver tea set from her wedding, cried while wrapping it in newspaper. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything, just clean. 3 months after the final payments cleared, I walked into my bank and withdrew exactly $46,950 in cash. Crisp hundreds, neat stacks. I placed them into a matte black lockbox with a velvet lining. On top, I left one note. "This isn't money. This is accountability." I didn't send it to them. I didn't post about it online. I didn't even tell Quinn. I just placed it in a private safety deposit box under my name. Not as a trophy, not as revenge, as proof. Proof that I had paid for my own escape. But they didn't get the last word. I did, quietly. And then I donated $5,000 to a nonprofit in Atlanta that helps adults recover from family-based financial abuse. They emailed a receipt and a one-line thank you that meant more than anything my blood relatives had said to me in years. That was the only gratitude I needed. That night, I sat at the desk where, 5 years ago, I had once skipped dinner so I could send Eli a rent deposit after he said his landlord was threatening eviction. I opened the same drawer where I used to keep their emergencies filed by urgency. And I whispered, just to myself, I didn't want revenge. I wanted my life back. And now it was paid in full. 4 weeks after the final payment cleared, my inbox lit up with a subject line that read, "Let's do Mother's Day right this time." I stared at it for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't demand attention but begs for war. It was short, just one line. No apology, no reflection, no mention of lawsuits, liens, garnishments, or public courtroom drama. Just, "We miss you. Come home for dinner. Just us. Let's be a family again." It reeked of bait, like they believed the black box and the lawyer letters were tantrums instead of truths. I didn't respond right away. I waited 3 days. Then I sent one sentence back. Fine. One dinner. Just family. No emojis. No worms. No loophole to hide behind. They thought I was crawling back. That the wreckage I'd left behind was starting to feel too cold, too quiet, too lonely. They assumed the distance was punishment for them, not a gift to me. But I didn't come to be welcomed. I came to end it. The table was set like always. Long mahogany polished to a mirror, tall candles in silver holders, cloth napkins twisted into swans. My mother wore the pearl necklace I gave her for her 60th, the one she claimed came from Trisha when showing it off to her bridge club. Trisha wore a deep-cut dress, and that smug smile she always saved for nights she expected to win. Devin sat beside her, loyal as a dog who knows where his leash is kept. Eli sat across from me, fidgeting. Of all of them, only he looked genuinely unsure of what was about to happen. "We're glad you came," my mother said, tone dripping with strategic sweetness. "We've all missed you. Maybe we went too far last time. Or maybe we didn't go far enough," my father muttered, swirling his wine without meeting anyone's eyes. My mother gave him a sharp glance, then turned back to me. "But family is bigger than pride, right?" she added quickly. "Let's not hold grudges. Tonight's about turning the page." She raised her glass. "I'm proud of all my children, even the ones who lost their way. We all make mistakes." She smiled, expecting me to nod or raise a glass in return. I didn't move. Then a voice echoed from the hallway. "Sorry I'm late." Every head turned. Cass stepped into the room, poised, elegant, completely composed. Her black dress didn't scream for attention. It demanded it. My sister's mouth dropped, wine still on her tongue. "What the hell is she doing here?" she hissed. "She's here for dinner," I said calmly. "With the family." Cass sat beside me and reached in her purse, placing a small sealed envelope on the table with quiet finality. "I've kept quiet long enough," she said softly. "But I was invited here to tell the truth." My father leaned forward, his jaw tight, like he was about to unleash something. But Cass beat him to it. "Lana," she said, addressing my mother directly, "in January, over wine, you told me this about your son. His emotions are his leash. He pays when he feels guilty." Then she looked at Trisha. "And you," she said, "who didn't know I was behind the hallway wall when you told Devin. Let him feel small for once." Trisha exploded. "She's lying. This is a setup. You brought her here to ambush us? You need serious help. You want to talk about help?" I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my inner jacket pocket. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, and slid it across the table. "Here's a wire transfer, $12,500. From my account to yours," I said to Trisha. "Approved without my consent. That's not a mistake. That's fraud." My father stood. "This is betrayal," he barked. "We came here to make peace, and you bring in this snake." My mother had started crying again, her napkin dabbing at her perfectly painted cheeks. But it was the kind of crying actresses do when they want to look tragic but not ruin the foundation. "I don't know what you want from us," she whispered. "I want nothing," I said, my voice even. "Not your apologies, not your calls, not your guilt. I want distance." I looked at each of them in turn. "I'm not your son anymore. I'm your consequence." Then I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a legal envelope, sealed and stamped. "Inside is everything that ties me to you. Termination of joint accounts. Revocation of medical proxy. Ownership of the family trust updated." Their eyes widened. My mother's mouth opened in a soundless gasp. "You changed the trust?" she whispered. "I didn't," I said. "Grandpa did, before he died. He saw it coming." "Bullshit," Trisha screamed. I dropped the envelope in front of my mother's glass. "This is your inheritance now," I said. "Emptiness. Just like the respect you gave me." Then I reached into my coat and removed an old photo, me at age 10, holding the same homemade card and crushed flower bouquet they all chose to forget. I tore it down the middle and placed the halves beside their plates. "One for each of you," I said. Then I stood and walked toward the front door. No one followed. Not a single voice called after me. The only sound was the quiet clink of a fork falling against porcelain. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air hit me like a baptism. My hands shook, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was adrenaline mixed with freedom. Cass followed me out without a word. We got into separate cars, drove opposite directions. Nothing needed to be said. What needed to be done had been done. The ending wasn't loud. The week after that dinner, silence settled over my life like fresh snow, clean, cold, and honest in its stillness. No calls, no texts, No guilt-soaked voicemails or passive-aggressive emojis. It was the kind of quiet I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years, the kind that hummed in my ears like peace instead of tension. I stopped checking my phone every morning like I was bracing for an emotional ambush. I started sleeping again, really sleeping, without waking up at 3 a.m. wondering what emergency would land on me next. But the silence didn't last long. 2 weeks later, I saw my father in the parking lot of the hardware store. He was loading plywood into the back of an old pickup, not the SUV I'd once helped him buy, the one he bragged about for months. That was gone, repossessed, most likely. His back was hunched, face thinner than I remembered, older somehow. He turned, spotted me, froze. His mouth opened, just slightly like maybe he had a line prepared. A half-sincere greeting. A fake laugh. Something to act like we weren't standing in the wreckage he helped create. But I didn't stop walking. I didn't nod. I didn't break stride. I passed him like he was just another stranger, fumbling with splinters in the heat. 1 week later, I spotted Trisha at an outdoor cafe, laughing too loud at something a man I didn't recognize was saying. Her arms were animated, voice pitched higher than usual, the way she always got when she was performing. I watched her for 5 seconds, maybe 6, waiting for the spark of something. Anger, sadness, bitterness, anything. But all I felt was air. Not even a flicker of resentment. She wasn't a villain anymore. Just background noise. A scene I'd watched too many times to care. The final confirmation that my life had truly shifted came one afternoon at a small coffee shop near my apartment. I hadn't stepped inside since last year. The last time I'd been there was on Mother's Day, right after I'd taken the car and left them to unpack the truth I'd wrapped in velvet. I used to sit at the corner table near the window, always facing the door, as if waiting for someone to show up and surprise me with forgiveness. That day, I walked in, ordered tea, and sat in the same seat. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't imagine any of them across from me. No ligeras conversations. No mental rewrites. No lingering ghost of what I wished they'd say. The chair was empty, and it felt like mine. Back at home, I pulled out a dusty storage bin filled with old memories I hadn't dared touch. Inside were family photo albums, birthday cards with fake affection, leftover ornaments from holidays I hosted because no one else wanted the work. I pulled out the last family photo we ever took, the one from Thanksgiving 5 years ago where everyone smiled like actors in a commercial. I was smiling too, but my shoulders were hunched, eyes tired, smile hollow. I looked like a guest in my own life. I threw it out, not in anger, in peace. That same week, I gathered 3 pieces of furniture. The coffee table I bought for my parents when their old one broke, the bookshelf I assembled for Eli's textbooks he never opened, and the dining chairs I gave Trisha when hers cracked during a dinner party she never invited me to. I loaded them into my car, drove to a local shelter, and donated them. Let someone else sit there now. Someone who might be grateful. Someone who won't twist the meaning of a gift into ammunition. Then I did something I'd put off for far too long. I opened my contacts and deleted every number linked to them. Not just my mother, father, sister, and brother. The cousins who laughed along with their jokes. The uncle who looked away. The aunt who said, "That's just how family is," as if generational cruelty was heritage. Gone. I didn't block anyone. I just erased them from my future. A month after the cafe moment, I got a letter from my mother. Real paper. Real ink. Same careful cursive she used when writing thank you notes she never met. It wasn't long. Just a single page. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was. She wrote about herself, her loneliness, her confusion, her health. She said, "It hurts to feel like I've lost a child," as if I'd simply wandered off and forgotten the way back. She didn't mention the trust, or the lawsuit, or the photo I tore in half and left like a verdict at her table. She just wanted me to know she was hurting. I folded the letter and placed it in the same black lockbox as the money. Not out of sentiment, out of record keeping. Another artifact in the museum of my endurance. Sometimes people say healing feels like fire. For me, it felt like water. Cool, clear, relentless. Not a blaze, but a flood that washed everything loose and carried it away. I wasn't chasing justice anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to call and say the magic words. I didn't even want an apology. I wanted silence. And I had it. At night, I started leaving my phone in another room. The first few days, I kept checking it anyway, like a phantom limb still twitching. But by the second week, the muscle memory faded. I stopped looking. I started listening to my breath, to my thoughts, to the music playing in my apartment that no one else ever turned down. I filled the space they left behind with small joys, long walks, loud playlists, hot coffee in a mug I didn't have to share. And then I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it Rebuild. Inside, I created documents with titles like Boundaries and Goals and people who actually show up. I listed the names of friends who had stood by me quietly through it all, the ones who didn't need updates or drama to check in. I reached out to one of them, Max, a former coworker I hadn't seen since last summer. We met for drinks, then dinner, then again the following week. It was easy, effortless, like a conversation I'd been waiting years to have. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't bring up lawsuits or betrayal or money. He just asked what I'd been reading, where I wanted to travel, how my job was going. I answered like a person, not a cautionary tale, not a cash register with feelings. That night, walking back to my place under streetlights that didn't buzz like accusation, I realized something that hit harder than anything they'd ever said. They hadn't changed, but I had. And that was enough. 3 months after I deleted every trace of them from my life, I got one last message. Simple, pathetic, and entirely predictable. It came from Eli. No greeting, no context. Just, Mom's not doing well. She talks about you a lot. I stared at it for a long time, trying to decide if I felt anything, if some buried instinct would stir inside me and drag me back into their orbit. But I felt nothing, not coldness, not rage, not guilt, just silence. That kind of silence you earn. They had exhausted every tool in their arsenal. Mockery, guilt, manipulation, theft. And in the end, they were left with nothing but the echo of their own cruelty. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the message again. I archived it and went back to cooking dinner, chopping garlic while music played through my apartment, filling the space where their voices used to haunt. I kept my life quiet, grounded, stripped of drama. Not because I was scared of confrontation, but because I finally understood peace had never been possible while they still had access to me. I stopped needing to explain myself to people who only heard what fit their script. A few weeks later, I found myself walking past a flea market on a Saturday morning. A vendor had a table full of framed photographs, strangers smiling in weddings, birthdays, vacations. Memories discarded, bought, and sold like trinkets. I picked up one of a boy and a woman in front of a birthday cake, her smile tight, his eyes uncertain. I stared at it until my hand clenched. That kid looked like someone I used to know. I bought the photo for $1. When I got home, I slid under a magnet on my fridge, not because I wanted to remember, but because I wanted to never forget how far I'd come from being that person. Unsure, waiting for approval that never came, trapped in a loop where love meant performance and pain was always dressed in a joke. The final test came when I ran into Lana herself. I was standing in line at the pharmacy. I heard her voice before I saw her, that polished tone she used when trying to charm strangers. I turned slowly, and there she was, slightly thinner, makeup immaculate, eyes scanning until they landed on me. She froze, then smiled like she'd rehearsed it. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, as if everything that happened could be undone with one carefully chosen word. I nodded once, just to acknowledge I wasn't a ghost. "How have you been?" she asked. I looked at her for exactly 5 seconds. Then I turned back toward the counter and said nothing. She didn't try again. That was the last time I ever saw her. The next spring, I moved to a new apartment on the other side of the city. Nothing dramatic. Just more space, more sun, fewer memories. I bought new furniture, a new bed, a new desk, things that belonged only to me. I repainted the walls in colors I liked. Not neutral tones they once told me were safe for resale. I stopped asking anyone what they thought. Sometimes people talk about closure like it's a dramatic confrontation, a final showdown with raised voices and tearful confessions. Mine was quieter. It came in paperwork and silence, in deleted numbers and locks changed. It came in cash in velvet boxes and letters stamped with legal intent. It came when I stopped waiting for them to become better people and started believing I deserved better even if they never changed. I took one final trip to the bank and closed a deposit box that had once held every dollar of their debt repaid. I withdrew the exact balance in cash, walked 3 blocks to the nonprofit I'd supported months earlier, and handed it over in person. No fanfare, no speech, just a quiet thank you to the woman behind the desk who didn't know my story and didn't need to. I walked home lighter than I'd felt in years. Not free because they apologized, free because I stopped needing one.